Hey friends, how's everybody doing today? We're like 3/4 of the way through this event and we beat Fallout 1. Like, amazing. Y'all are doing fantastic, by the way. This hour is dedicated to hanging out with Dr. Dan, answering questions about suicide awareness and prevention, and getting to know him a little bit better as he is the executive director of the channel, or sorry, the organization that we're raising money for. I looked over at my chat and like 50 things just popped up.
Yeah, not only are we 3/4 of the way in, we're we're also super close to $9,000 raised during the event, which is just amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Everyone's been doing such a good job, like playing the game, but also, you know, hyping people up and reminding everyone of their milestones and their incentives, and people are really, you know, it's working. It's great. I love to see it. It is almost over 9,000.
All right, before we get totally started, anybody let me know if I need to make any adjustments of the sound so we can do that early on and not have to do it halfway through. Yeah.
Yes.
It looks good on my screen, but you never know. We're streamers, you know.
Yeah, it's always tricky.
Dr. Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. I am so excited to be here again this year. It is Dr. Dan from Save&Raid, one of the largest suicide prevention organizations in the country, and in fact in the world. I have seen some of you before, been on some of the stream throughout the last couple of days and actually last year. So it's really exciting to be back here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a psychologist by training. I've worked in hospitals, I've worked in clinics, had a private practice. For the last better part of 20 years, I have been running the suicide prevention organization that we call SAVE. Developing programs, training people all over the world on what we can do to help prevent suicide, help save people's lives, and be there for people when a tragedy has occurred. So I'm stoked to be here, amazed and in awe of everything that all of you are doing. Not just the leadership team that puts this all together, but every single person who is out there hour by hour and all of the people who support them. It's humbling to me. So awesome to be here.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna go.
So you talk.
I want to go with like the first question that popped up in chat. Nukem Quad 9 is asking, when are you going to participate and play a game with us?
That's actually a great first question.
Let me tell you, if I could, I just like, I was watching about an hour ago and just listening to the conversation. I don't understand it. I watch in awe of what you guys are able to do, which every one of you playing these games and knowing the details and the things that go behind the scenes. And there was a session a few hours ago where somebody was trying to create a new room, a new tagline or something, and they put a new number in, and it's amazing what you all know. It's just amazing. I said about an hour ago, I said, look, you take somebody who's on the edge, literally life is on the edge for them, sit me down with them, I'm good to go. I can talk to them, and I can talk them off the ledge. Put me on one of these games, it's going to be over real fast.
Yeah.
And we all do have our own unique skill sets, that's for sure.
Yeah, that is true. Although I will say that anybody who watched my hour definitely knows that I also didn't understand anything. So.
Learning curve, but
yeah, for sure.
Maybe I'll take another trip over to Amsterdam and have a day over there. Bogle, and he can teach me some things.
I can teach you some games. Absolutely, that sounds great.
You know, that's something that I would love for either of us, is to have Dr. Dan hang out with us during one of the events.
During one of the events, that would be so good. Yeah. So you've told us a little bit about Save and its mission. Could you tell us a little bit more about how Save got started? It's been going on for quite a while.
Yeah, it really has. So a friend of mine lost her daughter to suicide in 1979, at a time when people really didn't talk about suicide at all. There were clinical people, there were people doing research that were talking about suicide, but very little was written about it. And she needed to talk about it, and she couldn't find anybody. So she started talking about it, and about 10 years later, brought together a few couples who had also lost somebody to suicide. And we worked on this, and we talked about it for many, many years. What would it be like to actually have an organization where people spoke publicly about this topic and tried to break down some of the stigma around it, not be afraid about it? The one thing that between she and I, her name was Adina Robleski, and she passed away quite a while ago now. She had a brain tumor, but one of the things that she and I always talked about was how do we translate science into plain English so that anybody can understand what some of these academics are talking about in a way that helps people, because I was involved in a situation many years ago where so I was in a statistics class in college and I hated it, and but I loved the teacher. She was amazing. So I spent a lot of time at her office hours. I thought things were going really well when she asked me to come to her office, and turned out that she needed some help because a close friend of hers and her family's had died by suicide. I got her all of this information, but it was written in English that she couldn't understand, and her family couldn't understand, and the family that lost somebody couldn't understand. So what Adina and I wanted to do was translate things and make it really understandable and easy to apply for anybody. Over the years, that's really what I've done, is built this organization in a way that can create programs now that cover lots of different places. We have a program that is called One Step Ahead that goes into workplaces, because in the workplace, we need to change the culture of a workplace from the top down if we want to change suicide. That is very true also in the military. That's very different than if you're going into a school or if you're going into a community. So we have different programs for things like that. Those programs are all different than our survivor programs. Those people that have lost someone that are grieving and don't know where to turn to and are feeling so afraid to talk to somebody about it because they're ashamed of it. So we developed other programs for those people as well. We have a program for people that are struggling, that want to talk to somebody who has lived experience. They want to talk to somebody who's been there before. We developed a peer connections program that just allows people to stay connected in a crisis moment so they don't have to go to a hospital. They don't even have to talk to a professional. They can talk to somebody that's got that experience. Basically what we did is, over the years, develop all of these different kinds of programs to make it really accessible for people where they want it, with what they want, with how they need it, in a way that works best for them. So that's really what Save's a lot about.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Because it's been going on for so long, I can imagine that, the list of accomplishments from Save is a long one. Is there any one or two particular things that you're most proud of that Save has been able to accomplish through its existence?
Save people's lives. When it comes down to it, that's really what it's about. When we had a woman who we heard about many years ago. We've done public awareness. Really, that was really kind of a big focus of ours for and it still is any kind of messaging about suicide, right? I'm probably the leading expert in the world that knows about messaging. We developed actually a certification program to help people learn how to talk about suicide safely and create websites and create brochures, everything around safe messaging. Well, many years ago, we had a billboard campaign, and a woman who had a son who is developmentally disabled. She was alone, left a note in the middle of the night, and she was driving to a bridge, and she was planning to take her life. And on the way to the bridge, she passed a billboard that had one of our messages on it, and she thought it was a sign that she wasn't supposed to do it, and turned around and went home. And we had heard about this because one of her parents actually lived in the same house with her and the grandson, and reached out to us and said, "We're going to lose our daughter here. What are we supposed to do?" And turns out she came home that night. So they were very thankful for it, and she emailed us and just said thank you for the billboard, because it was a sign.
How much feedback do you all get from people, or is that an exception, or do you get a lot of feedback from people that thank you for the material you put out?
I wish I could say it was a lot. We do get feedback. We get people that email us. They send us messages online through social media channels. They call our office. When I go out and I speak, we have people that'll come up and they'll say, "I heard this, or I saw this online, or I got this brochure, or I was walking somewhere and I picked up a wallet card." those kinds of things do happen. A lot of people are really ashamed to talk about it, that they've gotten to this really bad, dark place in their life, and they just want to move beyond it, right? So that it's hard for them. But we do hear that people have read our brochures, they've been to a presentation, it's the thing that saved their life, they've been through one of our programs. And we have people, we know, for example, that if you lose somebody to suicide, your risk of suicide goes up. We know that contagion is a real phenomenon. People think of that as copycat suicide, but contagion is a real phenomenon, and it happens a lot for younger people, but it happens for adults as well. Anybody that's exposed to this, their risk goes up. So if we're not doing the actual hard prevention work and trying to catch somebody before it's too late, this postvention work after a suicide's occurred is equally important. As a matter of fact, Dr. Ed Schneidman is the founder of the field of suicidology. He's the founder of this field. Okay. And he coined the word postvention. And what he said is that postvention is the most important prevention that we can do. And the reason he said that was because we know that those people that lose somebody are at great risk. Even if we're not doing straight on prevention in schools and with doctors and with law enforcement and military trying to help them save somebody before it's too late, helping these people that are struggling right afterwards. We had, just last summer, we had a family that came in, and a father who took his life. And he took his life on his son's birthday. That morning, he took his son out for a boat ride, and they were going out for a big family celebration, and that afternoon, something happened, and he went downstairs in his basement, and they couldn't find him for hours, and ultimately they did find him. A tragic story. And yet, we then saw his wife become very, very suicidal. She just couldn't imagine how she was going to continue on and what had happened, and she felt very guilty. All things very, very common when it comes to suicide. So our work, whether it's straight on prevention, postvention, helping people afterwards, all of it is the kind of thing that we do. And sometimes we hear about it and sometimes we don't, but when we do, it keeps you going, it motivates you. But if I can get to your specific questions about, like what programs have we developed, all of our programs are pretty unique in that they do something very different. Our program that helps memorial victims, that's really, really special. It's really intense. But our Peer Connections program is very different as well. So everything is pretty cool. I think the biggest program that we've got evidence behind is called LEADS. LEADS is Linking Education and Awareness of Depression and Suicide. There are only about 24 evidence-based programs that exist anywhere in the world. And these programs meet the highest scientific rigor ever. That's why there's not very many of them. And there's only 2 for schools, and we developed one of them. To have a program that meets that kind of scientific rigor is pretty cool, and it works for kids 9th through 12th grade. So lots of things.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Just to briefly go ahead.
I wanted to say thank you for the safe messaging.
Yes.
That is something we actively use in our channels, but also in our Discord server for this event. And it's something we put out there in our participant portal for everybody that participated in it.
So it's a lot based on the best practices for media reporting on suicide. So I wrote this list of what is considered the best practices for them to use this. And not only is that used all over the United States by journalists and media organizations, but it's actually used by the World Health Organization. We just finished actually updating the World Health Organization's media guidelines. They'll be released in March. And in there, they reference our guidelines because it is the standard for the world. It's really important when we talk about this issue to talk about it safely. We don't want people just kind of throw the word out there. Because if somebody says the word, we want them to take it seriously. So safe messaging guidelines, also really important.
Yeah, for sure. When you talk about postvention, I mean, that's a great concept. And I think I saw it in chat as well. Like a lot of people are very happy to learn about that idea of postvention. It doesn't only happen with like direct family members or people that know someone necessarily, right? Because sometimes, higher profile people, we lose quote unquote famous people to suicide, and how that is discussed in the news and in certain circles can definitely affect people as well. I can imagine.
Absolutely. This is where contagion comes in. If we look at the research on this, when a celebrity dies by suicide, there's about a 13 to 15% increase in deaths by suicide. We can see it usually about 2 to 3 weeks time frame after the celebrity has died. And in large part, that's based on the media and how media reports on it. It's why I developed the best practices for media. If they actually follow the best practices, we actually see reductions in deaths by suicide. When they don't, we see these increases. We see people, what ends up happening is somebody's out there and they're struggling, right? They're having a really hard time. And they see somebody who's a celebrity, Robin Williams, Kate Spade, Anthony Bourdain. We go through the list, right? Chester Bennington. We go through on and on and on these celebrities that we've lost. And people look at that and they go, well, if they can't make it, how am I going to make it? I'm already having a hard time. They have all the money, they have all the connections, they have all the medical care, and yet every single person and every single suicide is very, very different. They over-identify with that. And then when we have a real problem with younger people, they look at that celebrity that's died and they see all this attention around it. It may not even be a celebrity, but if they're in high school, or if they're in college and they see this huge outpouring of support, they see all these people grieving and lots of people showing up for a funeral, and then everybody wanting to do a memorial for them. They think to themselves, I can get the same thing too. All I have to do is just take myself out. So when it comes to this messaging around postvention, right, we want to teach people how to be able to honor somebody and pay tribute to them and their life without increasing the risk that somebody else might think, that's my way too, because that we don't want that for anybody else.
No. Wow, that makes perfect sense. Thanks. So we've been doing this event now for 3 years, and I think we've asked this question every year, but it's very important to keep asking it, I think. Can you tell us a little bit about what Save does with proceeds from events like this? Because there's others out there as well. You know, you work together with a lot of different people when it comes to that. But yeah, it's always good, I think, to hear, why we're doing this, basically.
I look at this in multiple different levels, right?
Okay.
I think in part why you're doing this is because you want to make a difference in the world. And regardless of how much money you raise, how much every person brings to this through the challenges, the incentives, and all the different things that you're doing, everybody's doing hour by hour. You bring in the money or not is part of it, right? And I'll tell you what we do with the money. Just the mere fact that you're bringing together a community is very unique. And it's very special. We know that connections, research tells us that the more connected people are, the more likely it is that we're not going to lose them to suicide. By building a community and by staying connected, you're sending out messages to the world that this kind of thing can save people's lives. Whether you bring in $1,000 or you bring in $10,000. That's huge to me, is just the awareness and the connections and all of the things that you share with people, the resources, educating people, all of those things, that's just as important to me as the dollars that come in. So I think that's really important. And in doing that, helping people, I have watched years now, and I've listened to some people tell their stories while they're going through the game. They'll take a break and they'll say, hey, there was somebody on, I don't remember what time it was, whoever, they're probably watching right now, but they were talking about getting all mushy, right? That was the word that they were using. That's real. That's real people. Talking about real soulful stuff that have happened to them, either recently or when they were growing up, or a hard time that they went through, or maybe somebody that they knew that they went through. You are healing as you're doing this, healing people's lives. So that's one half of the equation. What you were asking about is where's the dollars go? Something that's very unique about Save. In the United States, there's all these accreditation bodies that tell us, how much money you can spend as a nonprofit, how much money you should spend administration and fundraising, management kinds of things, versus actually how much you spend on your programs. Programs are the things that actually you're doing things for. What's your mission? In the United States, it's a 70-30 split. So as a nonprofit, you've got to spend 70% of your money on your programs, direct right back to the services you provide. You can't do more than 30% administration and fundraising. It's pretty different than that. We're always above 90%. As a matter of fact, most of the time we're around 92, 93 cents on every dollar goes right back to our programs. What that means is that we don't spend a lot on our administration, our salaries, our benefits, our overhead, all of those hard costs. We do have to have them, right? But we don't spend much on it. We spend most of the dollars going right back to our programs. The programs that this kind of event helps funds our public awareness, right? So we get out messages in the United States and around the world about suicide prevention. How can we change people's attitudes around this topic by getting out the right information, debunking myths, getting rid of stereotypes, having people know the facts about this, giving them the resources on where they can turn to when they're looking for help. So everything around messaging, we spend money on messaging. We spend some of the dollars that are raised by an event like this through education. We have a lot of places that will say to us, we need a speaker, but we can't afford a speaker. We want your LEADS program in our school. We can't afford it in our school. Our school district doesn't have enough money. Part of the money that we make through an event like this can go to helping a school get a LEADS program. We have all kinds of materials that we distribute. Now, our materials aren't very expensive. For example, a pack of our wallet cards. Little wallet cards that are for youth, we have them for adults, we have them for people who are grieving, we have them for military, we have them for law enforcement. All these wallet cards. A pack of wallet cards is $20, and there's 100 in that pack. We could take some of this money, and we can take these wallet cards, and we can ship them to schools. We can ship them to police departments. And the police can not only have them for themselves, but then they can give them out to people when they're going out on their shift and on their duty, and they find somebody that's struggling, or they're going to a school. All of these things, these materials we can get out into the community, is where some of your dollars go to. Finally, some of the dollars actually do go to helping people that are hurting. We have a guide. It's called Coping with Loss. It's a best practice guide. It was the first one that was ever written. It's a booklet. It's about 12 pages. It literally is there to help people through the darkest moments of their life. At the darkest moments before somebody's died, that kind of depression, that kind of grief, that kind of sadness, that kind of any one of the mental illnesses, right? We're talking about the grief part. That's what we're talking about. Get this guide to them so that they have something to literally hold on to in the moment that they're hurting the most and they don't understand. They have all these questions. Not only why, but why am I angry? Why am I sad? Can I ever laugh again? Am I ever going to be able to go on? This guide literally is a tangible something they can hold on to in the middle of the night when nobody's awake that they can read. That's where some of our dollars go from things like that.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for making that so concrete for us. But also, I do also want to thank you for basically addressing the sort of inherent flaw in the question, that it is not just about the money. And I feel that a lot. Every year, it feels very strange because Tiltify, the platform that we use to raise the money, requires us to put up a goal. And it always feels a little weird to set that goal because it's almost the least important part of what I do for this event is setting that goal, because it really it doesn't determine either success or failure in any way, shape, or form. And I'm very happy that from the start, I think even we've always kind of looked at it like that, because what you're talking about, these real connections and the fact that people feel inspired and safe to talk about some of these things, the mushy things, that's not something that you see very often in Twitch. I think you see it definitely in the communities that, you know, the people here are starting to build and are trying to build, but it's not a given. And that is, I'm glad you sort of put a finger on like that is the strength of what we're doing. Thank you.
I'd also, like celebrities, you go live, it's like being an actor. Like, there are some things that people choose to hide and not talk about, and that stays in.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, you choose what you show the world. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And although in today's world we're talking more about mental health than we ever did before, a lot because of the pandemic, we're talking more about suicide than we ever did before. There are a lot of people, celebrities, they're told by their agents, don't talk about this. Don't acknowledge it. You might be depressed. You might have bipolar disorder. You might struggle with anxiety. You might have a substance abuse issue. Don't talk about it. And the reason they tell their clients this is because the stigma around it is, well, nobody's going to want to hire you. They're not going to want to have you on set if you're struggling with depression, because you're going to slow down the whole crew. You're going to slow down the whole production if you're struggling with depression. You can't be able to trust that you're going to be there every day. You're going to be at your best performance. So you might have it. Don't talk about it. And that's something we need to change, because these illnesses, these are real illnesses. These are illnesses that start in the brain, and they affect the whole body. They affect literally how we think, how we act, how we feel, how we behave, what we can do, what we can't do. And you don't have control over that. You can't tell your brain what to do around those things. It's really hard for somebody who's got a real skill and a talent that becomes a celebrity to deal with these illnesses and not be able to be out about it and be okay with it. And yet we're doing better in society, but still very true out there. People are told, keep it quiet.
Yeah, especially in the higher levels, you definitely see actors, for instance, come to mind, that do talk about it, but these are generally the actors that have reached a part of their career where they can safely say these things, right? Because they're not that worried about not being hired because of this. And yeah, we need to be able to talk about it at all levels of fame or importance or whatever. That shouldn't matter, I suppose. Yeah.
These illnesses are part of the human condition. It's unfortunate. There are a lot of illnesses that are out there. You're talking about diabetes or heart disease. You're talking about kidney disease. You're talking about cancer. There's a lot of illnesses out there, and they all need a lot of attention. Mental illnesses, they get a bad rap. Just the name, mental illness, right? And the language around it makes it very hard. If imagine if we started telling kids about these brain illnesses, right? It would scare them, right? And we don't want to scare people around these illnesses. If we could get people to understand that they're real. When I do presentations, I'm after tonight. I got to log off here after tonight, and I'm going to do a big presentation.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to do a big presentation on a college campus. In every presentation that I do, whether I'm training doctors, I'm training people in the military, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I put up this slide, and then on one of these slides, I have a picture. It's from a SPECT scan. It's a very highly technical scanning device of the brain. You can see a normal brain, and on the other side of the slide, you see a brain struggling with depression. You can literally see the difference between somebody's brain who's struggling with depression. There's a lot less blood flow. There's a lot less activity going on in the brain. These aren't things that people just make up. They aren't things that don't really exist. These are real illnesses. So if we could go away from even just the shame around a mental illness and make it a brain illness, and people understand that these illnesses are part of the body, just like other parts of the body get sick. When you get sick, you got something wrong with your heart or your lungs or your kidney, you go to that kind of doctor. You get it treated and you take care of it. These are the kinds of advancements that, we've come a long way in the last 20 to 30 years since Save started. We still have a long way to go to get people to really be open and out about these things.
Yeah.
I want to field a chat question here real quick. We're about halfway through, so I'm going to sprinkle in some chat questions so we make sure we get to some of them.
Great idea. Yeah, for sure.
Following up on the celebrity thing, this is from Nukem Quad 9. All of us streamers are entertainers, media personalities, even if we're mostly small and niche. What are your media guidelines for the things like tribute shows to a celebrity who has died of suicide? What are the best practices for giving such a tribute for us?
That's a great question. So, as I was mentioning, we want to pay tribute to somebody who has died by suicide. We're going to honor them. We typically tell families, you take care of the memorial. You want to plant a tree, you want to put a bench out for somebody, you want to do something like that, you can do that. If they're going to do an event, they might want to do a walk or a run, or maybe you want to do an event in memory of somebody. You can do that, and you can mention that celebrity. But what I would suggest is not to focus on it. We don't want the focus to be on one particular person. We want it to be a bit broader, and we want it to be on the topic of suicide. We want it to be different than that person, because the reason behind all of this, and even the media guidelines, is that the person who died is much bigger than the way they died. That's the issue. We're trying to get people to understand about the way they died. Because if we can understand the way they died, we might be able to do something about how we can prevent that for other people. But we tend to just focus on the person, and we lose the suicide component. So I would say if you're going to do an event for somebody who died by suicide, whether it's somebody who's a celebrity or not a celebrity, you can mention that, you can talk to that, you can talk about it, make it broader than just that one person. Part of that is that there's so many people that we're losing, unfortunately. Losing somebody every 11 minutes in the United States, every 40 seconds in the world. Let me repeat that one. Every 40 seconds.
Bogle and I were just looking at the stats that you released in 2021, from 2021, and it was sad. It was
every
upsetting.
40 seconds.
Yeah, I'll try to link that in the chat as well if people want to have a look at that, because there's some great there's a word for this, like slides, like graphics to explain or at least display the statistics in a way that is very easy to understand. And
yeah, so oftentimes when a celebrity dies, they get a lot of attention, right? They're a high-profile person, so there's a lot of attention around them, and they're dying. Yet, majority of people that are dying by suicide are not celebrities. They're dying every day. In the United States, we're losing about 130 people every day. Every single day, 130 people. Most aren't celebrities. So I would say if you're going to do an event around a celebrity's death, you can. Try to minimize how much you make it about the celebrity. You can mention them. You can talk about it. Talk about the issue. That's really what we're trying to do. Raise awareness of the issue that it was about suicide and the prevention pieces of it that can go into it. Too often we find people feeling that, for example, they think to themselves, if somebody's suicidal, there's nothing we can do to stop them. It is so not true. It is so not true. Up until we lose them, we have every opportunity to save them. One of the things I tell companies, I work with all the technology companies. I tell this with businesses. I tell this with kids in schools. I tell this with doctors. You never know who's going to say the right thing at the right moment in the right way is going to make that difference. Up until the moment we lose them, we've got an opportunity to save them. So I would say talk about the issue and talk about the ways that we can go about saving somebody's life. Yes, you can make it, talk about a celebrity too, but talk about the others that we lose, because there's far more of those too.
that's good. Yeah. Great
Following
advice.
up on that, so we've been talking about, you touched a little bit on the bad statistics, but I'm wondering, are there any good trends or positive things that have gotten better in, I don't know, say the last 3 years that you all have been tracking?
Well, I'd be lying if I said yes. And you guys are all too good for me to lie to. So in 2019 and 2020, we did see some decreases in suicide in the United States and around the world. It's too early for us to know exactly why. There are suspicions. For example, the theory that I put out was about connections. And we were far more, during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, early 21, we were far more intentional about how connected we were. We checked in on people more. We made sure people were okay. Other things that were really happening in the United States and around the world is that governments were providing more services to people. They were taking care of people in different ways than they had before. Health was available. They provided more free medicines. They provided more economic assistance. Student loan forgiveness took place. All of the things, we call them social determinants of health. All the things that were creating stressors for people were given some relief. We don't exactly know all the reasons why of the drops in 2019 and 2020. The challenge with it is that in 2021, still in the midst of the pandemic, we not only lost all those advances, so the drops that we had, we went beyond it. So while we did see those drops, we went back right up. And we're now at the highest we've been at. The projections are not good going forward. People are struggling. The pandemic really hurt people. The pandemic hurt people's mental health a lot. The pandemic hurt and changed the way we work. And all of that fallout hasn't been fully determined yet. We know new research is coming out all the time simply about Zoom and some of the Zoom fatigue and some of the challenges with Zoom. Companies, we've seen in the tech industry, we've seen tens of thousands of people be laid off just in one industry, one sector, as a result of the pandemic. Everybody ramped up on their hiring and now they're cutting back on it. So in unemployment, we know unemployment and economic challenges are connected to suicide. When they go up, suicide goes up. Even though the unemployment rate is down right now, the number of people that are underemployed is very high. We've got a lot of challenges that are increasing the numbers. Unfortunately, I can't tell you that things are going in the right direction. I can tell you that we have some populations that are going in the wrong direction. African American males is going in the wrong direction. African American males and females have historically had very, very low rates of suicide. In fact, African American females have the lowest rates of any group, and they still are very low. But African American males really much higher now than it was before. The Latino and the Hispanic community, we're seeing increases in that population. Native Americans in the United States, twice that of Caucasians in this country. Our military, twice that of the general population. So we're not seeing the numbers go in the right direction in any category. Unfortunately, we're seeing, for example, if we look at the 15 to 24-year-olds, used to lose about 5,000 of those youth every year. Now it's over 6,000 that we're losing every year. So it's a troubling time that we're losing more people every year to suicide than we really should be.
Wow. I want to talk about working from home a little bit as well, because I remember we talked about it during the summer, and that is of course something that has been ramping up since sort of the end of lockdowns, but since the pandemic. But because you're talking about specifically groups that are struggling more than others, BSR in chat has a great question. Currently, trans people in the US face more and more restrictive legislation, which will lead to greater suicide numbers among this group. How can spiking suicide numbers be prevented in such a case, and is Save in particular taking any actions to be more active in this area?
That is a great question. So our LGBTQ population is at great risk of suicide. Unfortunately, we actually don't have data. It doesn't exist anywhere in the world to know actually do they die at greater rates. It doesn't exist yet. We don't collect that information on death certificates, unfortunately. Save has been working with the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, to try to get them collecting some of that data. We've been working with the Trevor Project for the last 3 or 4 years and the CDC to try to figure out some pilot programs. And how can we get that data collected? It's really complicated because we can't really get the people, the medical examiners and law enforcement to know how to collect the right data and how to get it from the right family members and the right friends. All of those things make it very, very difficult. That being said, so we don't know actually the number of deaths of people that are LGBTQ. We do know they are greater risk of suicide. They think about suicide more than the general population. They attempt suicide more than that of the general population. And really at all ages. It's not just young people. Even adults and senior LGBTQ individuals and trans individuals, much higher. It's about 40% higher. We know that population is at greater risk, and we do things. We actually have specific guides and booklets for families of LGBTQ, for those who are struggling, for friends who are struggling, and we get it out to them. The CDC actually recognized it as the best LGBTQ guides that existed, and the CDC purchased from us is to be able to distribute to all their employees at the CDC. We do put together guides and we do get that information out. Let me bridge that question just a little bit about some of the legislation pieces here, because it's really important. There's a lot of legislation coming around LGBTQ individuals in different states and different places around the world that are trying to be more restrictive and kind of shut down that voice. But they're also doing that around social media and technology. They're trying to make it so that technology has to do things to protect people more. And we don't have guidelines for that yet. Just a few weeks ago, I testified in the state of Utah before a Senate hearing on social media and technology. The issue actually came up around LGBTQ individuals as well as just young people. What we know is that when you close down voices, you're not helping anybody. You're making it worse. Although we don't have great guides for social media or even for about how LGBTQ youth should be talking about this, when they should be talking about it, where it's safe to talk about it, we know that not talking about it isn't good. We know that the more that we can open up the lines of communication, the better off we're going to be. So that kind of legislation isn't helpful. It does put people at greater risk. We want to fight against that kind of legislation, not just around the technology piece, around just sexual orientation, because it's not helpful. We need safe places when people can get the right information, the right education, the right information, the right resources, the right connections, so that when they need it, they're going to get the help that they need.
We got about 15 minutes left. I know you got to go right at the top of the hour.
Yep.
I wanted to. There are two things that I wanted to touch on, and maybe you can talk about these both at the same time, or one after the other. I wanted to talk about the warning signs and who's at the most risk. Things like how can we start a conversation with somebody we're worried about? Are there any myths and information that you want to be correct on? But I also wanted to talk about how we can best determine a course of action for a person who uses suicide as a talking point commonly for attention, or as a coping mechanism for their depression.
Okay, great questions. All right, so let's start with that second question. If anybody's talking about suicide, pay attention to it. Always pay attention. We never know when it might be the last time that they're talking about it. Most people don't use that word and just kind of throw it out there. And even if they do, something isn't right. Most of us in our daily conversations throw that word around because we're kind of worried that somebody's going to be freaking out about it if they say that word. So pay attention. Now, it may not be imminent risk that they're throwing it out there, and maybe they are looking for attention. That's a sign that somebody's got to talk to them. Somebody's got to connect with them. And again, it might not be about imminent risk, but it is something that's going on for them, even if they're saying that word. So always take it seriously. Always do something with it. Check in with them. Be really clear with them. And check out. Look, if you're not really thinking about that, let's try to use a different word for that, right? Tell me what it is you need. Tell me if you're hurting. Tell me if something's upsetting you. And we're going to talk about that too. Listen, if this is really what you're thinking, then we're going to do something about it. So that's really important. Let me tie that into the warning signs and how you can start these conversations. So the warning signs of suicide, you can get these on our website at save.org. You can get them online, things like that. There's two key ones that you want to pay attention to. Any kind of communication about suicide, talking about suicide, writing about suicide, listening to music about suicide, anything about communicating death or the intent of death and dying. That's a sign you got to pay attention to it. And looking for a way to die. Literally trying to figure out how can I take my life? What can I do? What access to resources do I have that's going to make it possible for me to die? So communicating my intent and looking for a way to die. That's the two most important things, the warning signs that you want to pay attention to. Now, the next group of warning signs that you want to listen for are things like somebody saying, I'm hopeless, I'm in unbearable pain. Listen for that exact phrasing, unbearable pain. This is not just, I'm in bad pain, I'm hurting. I'm in unbearable pain. You hear that? Pay close attention. Anxiety and agitation. You know that anxiety and agitation goes up as people get closer and closer to death. So if you have somebody who normally is pretty mild-mannered, pretty even-keeled, and all of a sudden it's been kind of dark and down, and now they're really filled with anxiety, pay attention to that. You're listening for that. I'm communicating about death, and then I'm looking for a way to die, and then I'm talking about I'm in unbearable pain. I'm hopeless. I feel trapped. There's no way out of this. There's no future for me anymore. All of these kinds of things are the things that are telling us somebody's in trouble. Somebody's at risk. What you didn't hear me talking about is I didn't say depression. I didn't talk about being sad or crying or having a hard time sleeping or eating. Those are important. They are too warning signs. Just not seen in as many people as those other warning signs. Pay attention to them. Put together a picture of a puzzle, right? And you're listening for the two main things, adding in some of those other pieces, and that's going to tell you about the warnings. Now, what do you do about that? Well, there's two different approaches here. You have no idea somebody's struggling. You have no clue that they're thinking about suicide, but you know something is off. Maybe somebody tells you that they're off, or you find something that they've written and you're worried about them. You can go up to them and ask them and say, hey, you don't seem like yourself lately. What, something going on? Can we talk about it? Or, I'm kind of worried about you. Let's have a cup of coffee together. Key piece in this conversation, when you don't know, is you're giving an observation first and you're offering something second. You're giving them feedback on what you're seeing in that person, and then you're offering them something. It is very, very different than if you know somebody's at risk. If you know somebody is thinking about suicide, you've heard it, you've read it, you've seen it somehow, and you need to go to them and you got to ask them. And you got to be really, really direct. To be very clear. As a matter of fact, I published the first paper on this many, many years ago. Somebody's really at risk of suicide, that's what their brain is thinking about. We've got to connect with their brain where it's at. That brain is at a very bad place. It's that death is my only way out of this pain. You've got to ask them very clearly, hey, are you thinking about checking out? You want to die? You don't want to live anymore? I don't care what word you want to use, as long as there's a fatality component to the question. You can get that fatality component out, that the clear indication that it's about death and dying, you're going to connect with that brain where it is. It's a very different conversation. If you notice some warning signs, right, and you're worried about it, ask directly. If you don't know any of those things, do an observation, offer some help, then take it to the next level.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you. There's a bunch of people in chat that are thanking you for many things, being here, and being clear in ways that we don't always hear as well, because it is hard to talk about suicide. People are really afraid to say the wrong thing about it or come off the wrong way. And there's been a couple people saying, thank you for letting us know exactly, how the money goes to help.
Let me follow up on that one thing piece there, because people often say, well, if somebody's suicidal, I shouldn't really ask them about it. I'm going to lead them down that path. We have a lot of research that tells us that's not the truth. Don't be afraid. Don't worry about it. We actually know that if you ask somebody who's thinking about suicide, you have a much better chance of not only saving them, but reducing their level of anxiety, reducing their level of distress.
I'm just looking for...
Interesting.
There's a question from Crunchy Snacker here real quick. Are there any statistics on how safe online communities can buffer risk factors in suicide?
Are there any statistics on how online communities? Not that I know of. I don't know of any statistics on that. It's still a new area. Even platforms like this, in terms of how many people can be saved by being connected. So I don't know of any statistics on that that are kept, but great question.
Bogle, did you have anything else? We got about 9 minutes.
Well, I think there's two questions I think we can still ask, and then I have some other stuff. I think we've got time for that. So if we're talking about resources, right? You've talked about some of the resources for Save. Let's say you're in a hurry, or you have someone who's not necessarily listening all that well, or you want to give them just this one thing, right? And instead of giving them 1,000 options and they're not doing anything with it because there's too much choice. If there's one resource that everybody should, like everybody here should like bookmark or keep in mind when talking to someone, what would you suggest?
It depends on where you are in the world, right? You can always
Yeah.
give the International Association for Suicide Prevention website because that has a list of crisis lines around the world, and that's just iasp.info. iasp.info. So that's kind of a global one that has a lot of good resources. Here in the United States, I would give 988. I would say 988 is the new national hotline here in the United States. You can text and chat to that as well. There's great resources that you can get through that. Of course, everybody can just go to save.org, right, and get access to all of these things as well.
Yeah, there's that help tab at the top of the page that I bookmark and give to people frequently.
Yeah. So 988 was designed, was released last July. It was designed to be a very simple, easy to remember number for people. And not everybody likes to call. You can text and chat. You can do a lot of things with it and get information there. So I think the most important thing is for people to know what's going to help the person most. Most of the time, when they're in a crisis, they're not going to be able to figure it out. They're not going to be able to decide what's the best place for me to turn to. So you offer them something. You tell them, here's a great website to go to. Pick one. Right? Pick the International Association. Or pick Save. Right? That's all you need to do. Or just say 988. Just whatever it is that you think is going to be the best place for them to go and that you think they're actually going to do it. There's a lot of people that just won't have those phone conversations. So give them another opportunity, another way to do it.
Awesome, thank you.
I just wanted to say that we are like 27 cents from crossing $9,100 raised so far.
Yeah, we crossed the 9K mark during
Yes.
this hour, which is amazing. That's right. Thank you so much, everyone. So there's a bunch. Sorry,
we
go ahead.
should talk about some of the kind of like the social media issues, right? Because that's a really prominent thing right now, right? Is people talking about social media and what happens online. All the tech companies are developing tools and products that can help identify people that might be at risk and provide resources to them. The tech industry is in a kind of a weird place right now. There's lots of regulations that are coming against them, trying to clamp down on them. There's a lot of legal cases that are going on around the tech industry. And yet, we know that the tech industry provides a lot of support for people, provides a lot of connections, provides resources to people. We know that if somebody says that they're in trouble and they're on one of the platforms, immediately people jump in to help. They offer all kinds of things. So this is really kind of a weird time for all the tech companies. Next week, I'm going to be out at TikTok. I'm going to be out at their headquarters here in the United States, working with them to help them build out some of their platforms. Late last year, one of the things that we did is we worked with some of the TikTok influencers around the world. And I trained them on when they're talking about suicide, same things that you guys use, the same exact guidelines, right? I trained them, hey, look, if you're having a conversation about mental health and suicide, here's how to do it safely. You're an influencer, here's how to do it safely. We're trying to do some pretty unique things in the tech industry to change how it goes, because we don't want it to be just a dangerous place, right? Where there's bullies out there, where there's people that do the wrong things or, kind of demean people or put people at risk. We want the social media companies to be safe places. So there is a lot that's going on there, but it's coming in a lot of attack from a lot of different directions.
Dr. CECS just asked what I think is a very important question that a lot of us are trying to navigate here on Twitch, specifically, and maybe many other places. Apologies. Okay. I was wondering, as a streamer, about trauma dumping has become something more, or streamers have become more aware and have started to address. But mainly, it's them saying trauma dumping isn't allowed, which is a rule that people set in their channel. And if people come in and trauma dump, they'll get kicked or timed out or banned from the channel. Because it is, it's a thing that's hard on the streamers. That is a hard thing to navigate when you're already going 200% behind a camera. While this isn't along the same lines as someone who tells you they're suicidal, what advice would you give to a streamer who would potentially come across a situation where someone would come in more than once and talk about their issues, significantly?
I'd say it's a great question. I would say be supportive, be understanding, do it offline, connect with them offline. Sometimes those trauma stories can be re-traumatizing, not only for them, but they can re-traumatize other people. And they can really, really have an impact. And now sometimes they can be very therapeutic, right? We can see somebody who's used to cut themselves and then they post pictures or they talk about healing and recovery and they're celebrating an anniversary, right? Sometimes those things work really well, but sometimes they really don't. They become promotional. And I work with all the tech companies to help discern that and train the content monitors. How do you discern what's safe, what's not safe, those things? Most of the time we say try to have that conversation, but don't shut it off completely. Just move it to a different place. Move it to a way that you can still support them and still acknowledge the pain, but just not in front of everybody because everybody's at a different place at the same time. I want to shut down.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Well, so following up after the stream can be very important, and during the stream, knowing and letting your mods know that they can follow up and let this person know that they're not being shut down, but that they are here, that we are here for them, can be very important without triggering other people in the chat. Absolutely, yeah. Since we have 2 minutes, I just wanted to briefly check with you if it's okay, because there's a bunch more other questions from people that if we sort of group those questions together and send them to you, if you could answer them at a later date, maybe writing me an email, and then we can put that up in the Discord, maybe even put some of those answers up on the website. I think that would be a great idea. And then I did it last year, so I'm going to do it again. Every year now you have challenged us to do something in terms of raising the money that we're raising here. You've challenged us, and every year we have risen to that challenge, and we have not disappointed. Have you thought about a challenge for us this year?
Yeah, I have. As you've risen to the challenge, I've met the challenge, right? My bank tells me that each year.
We do always say donate responsibly,
Yes, right. Well, I'm so impressed by everybody here that puts the time in and the energy into this, getting ready for this, preparing for this, talking to people about this, doing what you do all the time, and being here and being part of it. So for me, it's an honor. It's really an honor on behalf of Save, but it's an honor personally to be a part of this. Bogle, it's great to get to meet you in person, and I hope I can meet lots of you in person. So this year, what I was thinking is over the time you've got left, whatever it is, 12, 13 hours, I don't know what it is, but whatever you got left.
11 now.
Every hour that you raise $100, I'm gonna match that. So we'll go over what I offered last year, which was 1,000. Let's see if
we're gonna do our best for sure. That's amazing.
See if you can take 1,200 or 1,300 bucks from me, and we'll put it to a good cause, because all of the things that you do humble me. They really humble me.
Thank you so much.
In what you're doing. So
that's an amazing
challenge. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to slide in one more question before Dr. Dan runs. If you had one message for the people watching the stream, what would it be?
That's the one I wanted to end on too.
Yeah. What was it?
If you had one message for the people watching the stream, what would it be?
I had one message for people watching this, it would be that you're amazing. What you're doing is changing the world. What you're doing is something that is going to make the difference in people's lives. It truly is, and whether you know that or not, it inspires me. It inspires my organization. I talk about this throughout the year. We were talking before. I'm going to see if I can present this at a World Congress and speak about it. So the message would be is that you're saving lives. You may not know it, and it goes way beyond the dollars that you're raising. You're saving lives. So thank you.
Dr. Dan, thank you so much for joining us again this year.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is always the highlight of the event, honestly. and very informative. Very very kind of you to always be able to do that with us. Thank you so much.
All
And,
right.
good luck with a group of college
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. You guys have a great time, and let me know how much you're going to hurt me by.
Yes, absolutely. Say hi to Linda. I think we saw her in the background.
Yeah, she took off already. All right. We'll see you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Bye.
Dan.
Thank you.
I think we can just do this, and we'll be here if I do. No, that won't work. Hey, Bogle, jump to the meeting room chat quick.
Oh, yeah, sure. Hello.
Okay.
I am back.
He is. Okay. Let me.
I briefly thought you just wanted to kick me off the stream, so just go to that meeting room and then I'll
Yeah.
and not
use
meet.
No, it just we had the Dr. Dan thing set up in the
Yeah,
in
that
the
makes
Dr. Dan
sense.
channel, which was a different scene, and we had to jump
Yeah.
our webcams.
No, that makes perfect sense. And this is the first year where he really needed to hop off, so we kept him probably a little longer than he wanted to.
Ah, that last,
Anyway, but
some of those last questions were so important, though.
yeah,
Alright,
no, they
the raid
were
for
very
Old
much
School J
very
is getting
important.
started. Old School J will be
Sweet.
starting Fallout 2, which we're really excited about. I am so proud of everything that you all have done, getting to end of Fallout 1, and I can't wait to see what kind of progress we can make in 2. And me, Bogle, and more people from the staff team will be here at the end of the event to wrap up
Yes,
and push for some
absolutely.
milestones. Love y'all!
and